Hello everyone, this is AlezierChess, here to help you to realize your potential. And today we're going to be looking at a game that was sent to me by a friend and subscriber named David Sullivan. And this game took place in 1985 between Robert Huebner and Garry Kasparov. It was from a 6-game match that they played, which was won by Kasparov with 3 wins and 3 draws. And some facts about the players. Robert Huebner is a former European champion. He also tied for first in the West German Championship when he was 18 years old. He became a grandmaster and a candidate in 1971 based upon his results in the Palma de Mallorca Interzono of 1970. And Garry Kasparov, he was a multiple-time world champion. He won the championship against Anatoly Karpov several times. He also won against Nigel Short and Viswanathan Anand before finally losing his title to Vladimir Kramnik in the year 2000. Let's get into the game, guys. We have pawn to c4 from Huebner, pawn to e5, the so-called reverse Sicilian. We have knight to c3, and pawn to d6 from Garry. Nowadays, knight to f6, knight to c6, and bishop to b4 are all more popular options. But here after d6, Huebner should play knight to f3 before embarking on d4, and we're going to see why. He played d4 right away, and Kasparov takes, Huebner takes, but now his queen is about to get harassed by black's knights. We have knight to f6, pawn to g3, knight to c6, and already the queen has to move again. And we already know that we do not want to be moving the same piece twice in the opening unless we have a good reason. Here, Huebner does not have a good reason because d4 was suboptimal. Now, after queen to d2, we have bishop to e6, targeting the pawn on c4, and Huebner cannot defend it with pawn to b3, as that's already borderline lost for him after bishop to g2. After d5, breaking in the center, and bishop to g2, pawn takes pawn, which just loses a pawn for no good reason. And here white is much, much worse. And in the event of pawn takes, we have knight takes, and here you have to swap out, but then if you swap out, the bishop is going to hit the rook, and then this bishop is going to come and pin your queen, so you're going to lose material. Now, why do I say you have to swap out? Because after knight takes, bishop g2, bishop to b4, bishop b2, queen to f6, then here you're holding on, right? Wrong. After rook c1, castle's queenside, this is just totally lost for white. As after a3, bishop to a5, b4, trying to break the pin. We have knight d takes b4, and white is totally lost. As he's down a pawn, the attack continues. The pin is going to be back on after the knight moves from the b4 square, and the h-file rook is ready to come into e8, and black's going to have a fully mobilized army, and these guys on the king side still haven't gotten out of bed yet. So here, instead of b3, Huebner played knight to d5 to lock the d5 square so that Kasparov can't break with pawn to d5 to open up the position. So here we have knight to e5, continuing the initiative by attacking the c-pawn again. And yes, this is moving a piece twice in the opening, but this piece is moving with purpose. So now after b3, the weaknesses on the dark squares have been induced so that Kasparov can later play c6 and queen a5. So we have knight to e4, again forcing the white queen to move. And after queen to e3, hitting the knight, we have knight to c5. Now, both of these knights have very good posts for the time being, as playing b4 or f4 will be too severely weakening for the white position to handle. So here we have bishop to b2, We have pawn to c6, hitting the knight. The knight goes to f4, hitting the bishop. And now we have knight g4, again harassing the white queen. So she goes to d4, where she's centralized. And here, she's putting pressure on this diagonal in case this dark squared bishop moves. She could take on g7. But here, knight to e4 was played by Kasparov. Now, what's the big idea with just hanging your knight, you might ask? The big idea is that if this knight is accepted, we have queen to a5 check, and after king to d1, knight takes f2 check, and the white queen is lost on the next turn. So here, Huebner played bishop to h3 in order to free the f1 square for the white king. We have queen to a5 check, king f1, and now knight g takes f2. Now this breaks the white king's cover, and after bishop takes on e6, f takes, the f file is now open for Kasparov's h-file rook to come and attack the white king. After knight takes pawn, can you guys find the best move here for Kasparov? That's right, the top move according to Kasparov and Stockfish, king to d7. Now, the white knight is hit, but the most important thing here is that the queen's rook can come into play on the e8 square. So here, after knight to h3, instead of taking this rook, which would be greedy, and would also allow for queen takes knight, and then this knight can't get out of the corner, and this knight here on h3 will be active. Here, the knight on h3 is captured, and after queen takes knight on e4, we have rook to e8, which pins the knight to the queen, and after knight to c5 check, queen takes knight, queen g4 check, regaining the material after king c7. Here, the white king is just way too open. So now, after bishop to e7, bishop takes g7, hitting the bishop, using the bishop to hit the rook. What move do you guys think that Kasparov played here? That's right, guys. The winning move here is rook h to f8 with check, sacrificing the exchange in order to get a mating attack on the white king. After bishop takes rook, rook takes check, king to e1, queen f2 check, king to d1, queen d4 check, and now, because these rooks never connected and the king is still in the middle, now the king has to step up to the second rank so as to avoid severe material loss. And now we have queen to e4 check, keeping an eye on this rook in the corner. And now after king to d2, bishop g5 check activates the bishop into the attack on the white king. And now after king to c3, we have queen e5 check, and here Huebner resigned. Why did he resign? Because, for example, if he plays king to d3, we have queen e3 check, king c2, queen takes e2 check, and here if king c3, we have queen d2 checkmate. And here if king b1, we have rook f2, which will be mate after, say, queen takes h7, king b6, c5 check, pawn takes, and there's no way for you to cover both c2 and b2 from being the target squares for the mate of the white king. And also here, after queen e5 check, if king to b4, then we would have king to b6, getting ready to play queen a5 checkmate, pawn to c5, queen takes would be mate, and in the event of king to a3, queen a5 check, king b2, queen d2 check, king b1, bishop to f6, and it's going to be mate on b2 shortly. Also, if king to a3, bishop to f6 covers the b2 square so that queen a5 check is made. And in the event of, say, rook hb1, queen a5 check is made. And in the event of pawn to b4 to create the b3 square for the king, we have queen b2 check, king a4, queen c2 check, king a3, and bishop to b2 check and mate. So what did you guys think of this game? Like, share, comment, and subscribe. And also stick around for some analysis as we're going to go back and take a look at all of the important moments in the game in more detail. So let's turn on a notation here. Now, in the event of here on move 2, we have bishop to b4 is an idea. After knight d5, we have bishop to e7 because white did not want to get doubled pawns. That's a possibility. We also have knight to f6, just continuing our kingside development. We also have knight to c6 here on move 2. Now, in the game continuation after d6, instead of an immediate d4, Huebner could have played knight to f3, and say Kasparov had intended f5 with a King's Indian-like position, we could play d4 here, and if pawn takes, we can take with the knight, so this way we don't lose time by getting our queen harassed right out of the gate. But after e4, the knight can go back to g1, and if knight to f6, bishop to f4, here the game could continue after either bishop to e6 or bishop to e7. But in the event of, say, knight h5, you can play knight to h3 here, and after knight takes, this position is slightly better for white. Now, on move 4, we could also play knight to c6 right away, and after queen d2, a5 is recommended by the computer. Also, here on move 7, we went through the line with b3, which is just completely lost for white. Here on move 9, the engine also likes f5 instead of knight c5, but after, say, f3, knight c5, here you cannot play b4 because of knight cd7. After f4, c6, pawn takes knight. Oh, I want a piece. Okay. Here the computer just goes crazy and says take the piece. Black is still much better. After knight to c3, bishop takes b4, rook b1 hitting the bishop. Here we have queen to b6, and after rook takes bishop, queen takes, knight to f3, castles, bishop g2, bishop takes c4, and here you can't take on e5 due to rook a e8, and after knight takes c6, we would just take the knight, and here white is completely lost. And here knight takes e5 is a move that I inserted. This is not the best move recommended by the engine, but here this position is still so problematic because there's 3 pawns for that piece, and here it's 3 pawns and a rook at this point for the 2 minor pieces, the knight and the bishop. But again, white's king is not safe. Even if he gets castled, he's still going to have problems due to the passed c pawn and these central pawns that are controlling all of the squares from his pieces. Now here in the game after c6, knight to f4 was played, but in the case of bishop takes knight, pawn takes, opening up the dark squared bishop, knight to c3, queen a5, rook to c1, castles queenside, taking over the d file, bishop to h3. Here the computer comes up with the insane g5, which gets ready to play g4 to kick the bishop back. But if bishop takes, we now have knight takes, which comes back and defends the g5 pawn while opening up the dark squared bishop to come out. And here black is again much better. And also after knight to g4, if we have knight takes bishop, hitting the black queen, here we can just play pawn takes. And after queen to f3, knight e4, again with the queen a5 check idea. And that's in case you take either knight, because even if you take on g4, we have queen a5, and after king d1, knight takes on f2 with check, again picks up the white queen. And after knight e4, bishop h3 here, instead of bishop to h3, in the event of f3, hitting both of the knights, queen a5 check, king to d1, c5 hitting the white queen, queen takes, and knight f2 check, again wins the queen. And in the event of, on move 14, if bishop c3, knight takes bishop, a3, so this way after the knight moves you can play b4 and hit the black queen. Well, just fine, we put the knight on a4, so now after b4 the knight is no longer exposed to attack. We have now won a piece, but it looks like we're going to lose a piece back, right? Wrong. Queen to e5 hits the undefended white queen, and now if she's defended we have time to capture her and then save our knight on g4. And if queen takes queen, we have knight takes, and in the event of knight takes bishop, which now defends the white queen while capturing the bishop, which removes the defender of the g4 knight, after pawn takes, white cannot take this knight due to queen takes rook check, king f2, and then the black queen drops back to f6 to guard the e6 pawn. And here black is up a pawn and a rook. So here, after knight g takes f2, it would have been better for white to play knight to f3 potentially, due to knight takes bishop, queen takes knight, knight takes knight, and here you have to play queen takes. If pawn takes, trying to go for f5 potentially if this queen were to move, we just get castles queenside, knight g5 due to the support from the pawn, d5 breaks the position open, and after queen to f3, d takes c4, black is just again much better, as his king is safe and he has coordination and he's about to get this dark squared bishop developed. And here after king to d7, we had knight to h3 in the game. In the event of knight takes bishop check, we would have rook takes, knight to f3, and now queen to h5, threatening to bring the queen into h3 potentially, as well as threatening to sacrifice rook for knight. We have rook g1 saving the rook, rook takes knight, pawn takes, and here, instead of queen takes on f3, we have an even stronger move, rook to f8. Why is this so strong? Because here if pawn takes knight, knight to d3, king to g2, queen f3 check, king to h3, knight to f4 check. Not even knight f2 giving the queen an opportunity to sacrifice itself, but knight to f4 exploiting the pin on the fourth rank, on the third rank rather, because it's not protecting the fourth rank like it's supposed to. King to h4, queen h5, check and mate. And here, after rook to e8, had queen g4 been attempted, rook takes e6, queen takes, and queen d2, hitting the pawn on e2 and the bishop on b2 is just fatal. And here we have all the mates at the end. So how did you guys enjoy the game and the analysis? Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Excuse me if I was a little bit discombobulated at any point in the video. I have a little bit of a sinus problem at the moment. So take care, guys. I hope you guys enjoy the video. Peace.